11.4 Stocks, Bonds, and Mutual Funds. So in previous sections we've looked at what would our payments be if we loaned money. This question goes the other direction. What do you do if you want to invest money? The primary tools for investing are stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Real estate can also be seen as investment. Businesses can be seen as investments. But these are the open trading markets that you can work in. So I want to make sure you understand what each one of these three things are. So let's start with the most prevalent and the most popular one, stocks. What is a stock? Well, when you buy a stock, you are actually buying ownership of a company. So a share of stock is in a company is a certificate that indicates partial ownership of the company, if you see that right here. And it says the owners of the certificates are called the stockholders or shareholders. So when you buy stock, you are actually purchasing part of that company. Now, granted, there's millions of stocks, so you're buying a very, very small percentage of the company, but you are a part owner. So what does that mean? Well, what if the company turns a profit? When it's profitable, it has to share those profit with the stockholders or the owners of the company. So when it distributes its profits, that's called a dividend. Stocks with dividends are wonderful investments because you get, if the company does well, you actually get a check every single year. So it says a dividend is usually expressed as a per share amount. For example, you might get 7 cents per share. So let's read this first example. It says a stock pays an annual dividend of 84 cents per share. Calculate the dividends paid to a shareholder who has 200 shares of a stock company. So to find out the dividend, what you're going to do is you're going to take the number of shares and you're going to multiply that times the dividend per share. So to see what our dividend here is, the number of shares that they own is 200 shares. The dividend per share is 84 cents. So if you do 200 times 84 cents, put that into your calculator, looks like I'm getting $168. So this person would receive a $168 check for the dividends for the year. So what do you do with those dividends in the real world? Well, there's two different things you can do. Number one, you can cash the check, or number two, you can reinvest that money back into the stock. I'll let you know that one of the great ideas of doing is reinvesting that money back into the stock to buy more stock. My grandparents did this with Microsoft back in the 80s. They put money into Microsoft, and instead of accepting a dividend check, they reinvested that stock. An original investment of $8,000 40 years later turned into a $400,000 account or a $400,000 investment. $8,000 to $400,000 just from putting those dividends back into the shares of Microsoft over all those years. So I highly, highly recommend considering if you have a stock that pays dividends, reinvest those dividends back into the stock just to buy more stock. Act like it's money you don't have, and then when you need it, you'll have a lot more. Let's try example 2. It says a stock pays an annual dividend of 72 cents per share. Calculate the dividends paid to a shareholder who has 550 shares of the company's stock. Again, to get that dividend, we're going to do the number of shares times the price that they get of the dividend per share. So the dividend is equal to, well, this person has 550 shares, and the dividend paid is a nice 72 cents per share. This person's going to get a dividend of, plugging that into my calculator, I'm getting $396. $396. Okay, so what is a dividend yield? It says the dividend yield, which is used to compare companies' dividends, is the amount of the dividend divided by the stock price and is expressed as a percent. Determining a dividend yield is similar to calculating a simple interest earned on an investment. So a dividend yield is a percentage, okay? Our yield is essentially our interest. What interest rate are we earning, okay? It says you can think of a dividend yield as interest earned on a stock price as the principal, and the yield is the interest rate. Again, if we went back to simple interest formula, I equals PRT, if we think about that, What they're saying here is you could think as the dividend as the interest earned, so this would be the dividend. The stock price is the principal. And then it says the yield is the interest rate. So this would be the yield. Again, it is a percentage. And then our time period on this is 1 year because these are annual dividends. So we could use the simple interest formula I equals PRT, where I is the dividend, P is the stock price, R is the yield rate, which we'll be solving for, and T is the time won. In other words, if you wanted to simplify this in solving for R, you would take I, or both sides of the equation, and divide them by PT. But remember, T is always going to be 1 here for 1 year. So in other words, we have R equals I over P. But then again, you have to multiply that times 100 to make it a percent, or just convert it to a percent. So there's a formula that you could write on your note card and use during your test. Read this last point of interest. It says usually the dividends earned in shares and stocks are sent to stockholders. However, in a dividend reinvestment plan or DRIP, the dividends earned are applied towards purchases of more shares. So this is exactly what I was suggesting earlier when I was talking about Microsoft, is take that money, reinvest it back into the plan. That would be called a DRIP account.